Hey YouTube, Kira Qualia here, bringing you all my Cardfight Vanguard Dragontree Dark States deck profile. This is the final of the 5 different variants you can make for the Dragontree Gryphogilla deck. I saved Dark States for last just because I feel it to be the most underwhelming of the decks. It does rely on building Soul for you to utilize calling out units onto the field while also building up your Dragontree markers, but with terms of Overtrigger, the, Galmelga held Overtrigger gives you plus 10 and critical to your Vanguard. So the earlier on in the game you would get it, the definitely more threatening it is. You already have the, plus power and additional critical for Dragontree markers you have set up with Gryphogilla. So the Overtrigger as itself, aside from the 100 million power that it can hit for the restand power as well with your Vanguard, and to potentially hit for 3 critical with each attack, can be menacing if your opponent cannot block the attack. But with the overall power of the other Overtriggers, it doesn't really add as much to the deck as others could have. But still, I'm very happy with the results of the deck. It does have a fun playstyle to utilize the Soul with all the other many cards we run. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the Ride deck as usual, starting off with Grypho Sid, our card that sets up all of our Calamity orders in our Soul during each turn from our Ride deck. And then once all 3 are set up, we can then ride into Gryphogilla, with the first one being the Start to the End, our next one being Menacious Metamorphosis, and then Looming Demise, and then finally our Overtrigger for the deck, which is Hades, Dragon Deity of Resentment, Galmelga held. Like I said before, it just has the additional effect during your turn, all your Vanguards get plus 10 and an additional critical until end of fight. So it could, linger over, but if you haven't defeated your opponent by the turn you resolve your Overtrigger. I haven't really seen too many games where Gryphogilla is going into additional turns even after going through everything from the Ride deck. But for the actual main deck, we are running the 4 Dragontree of Ecliptic Decimation. Gryphogilla have the additional plus 5,000 for each Dragontree marker on your rear guard. If you have 3 or more, it gets an additional critical. And when it attacks a Vanguard, choose a face-up Calamity card from your Ride deck, remove it. If you did not remove a card, choose a Overtrigger from your Ride deck, reveal it, activate all of the trigger effects and additional effects, remove it, and stand all your rear guards with Dragontree markers. So this is what you want to build up with all of the many different Dragontree decks. And like I said before, you have that set up to build up Soul, with the Dark States deck being your main focus to help with that. For the other units that I want to run the deck, if you don't have Clean Sweep Dragon, I have Squalid Freaks in as a placeholder that you could run as well. But Clean Sweep Dragon can just set up your opponent's cards in their own Soul or cards in your own Soul with this card to build up the power with your Clean Sweep Dragon on the turn that you may have Persona Road, giving you that just one Counterblast, but you really don't use Counterblast for much else in the deck aside from some orders and our Dragontree Wretch, Demon Shredder, for us to place the Dragontree marker on the field. For the other grade 2s that I run in the deck, I also run 4 copies of Steam Mage Ashur Da on the guard circle. If your Soul has 7 or more cards, this unit gets plus 5 shield, and when this unit is retired from the guard circle, you may put this card into your Soul. So additionally, you could build up the Soul for your other Ashur Das to gain additional shield power, but just being able to set this card up in the Soul, and also with this card having a grade 2 option of Intercept, you can intercept from the rear guard and have the additional plus 5 guard power when your Soul has 7 or more cards in it. Moving on now to the grade 1s, I run 4 copies of Dragontree Wretch, Demon Shredder. With this card, one placed on rear, counter plus 1, choose up to 1 rear guard without any Dragontree markers and put a Dragontree marker on it. And on the rear guard, once per turn, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Soul Blast 2, choose a grade 1 or less card from your Soul, call it to rear guard in the same column as this unit. It's just set up using Soul Blast power to then at least call rear guard so you can preserve other cards in your hand to either guard against your opponent with and defend your Dragontree Gryphogilla until you can set up all of the order cards removed in the deck so you can get to your Overtrigger. So being able to utilize the Soul means that we use some other cards to build up that Soul power as well. One of them being our Steam Battler Gungrim, which I'm running 4 copies of. When placed on rear, you can just Soul Charge 1, and then you can also Soul Blast 3 and draw a card. The only other card you'll have in Soul additionally after you remove all of the orders is the 1 Grypho Sid, so that's what you'll have to work with your Vanguard circle after going into Gryphogilla. But you'll have the Persona Rides to rely on with Gryphogilla as well, giving you other cards in the Soul to then utilize for Soul Blast power or any of the other cards we run. And I also run 3 copies of Steam Skara Zargon. When this unit boosts, choose a unit boosted by this unit, and it gets Vanguard or Rearguard. When this unit attack hits a Vanguard, choose up to 2 cards from your drop zone, put them into your soul until end of turn. So it gets the skill of just being able to put cards into the soul, so you have that power of Zargon to be able to set up the soul. I thought of running 4 of this card. If I were to do so, you could just drop one of the copies of Gungram down to 3 and put a 4th copy of this. Since all this card has to do is boost, so it could also boost other cards like Gryphogilla on the field for that added pressure of if the attack does hit an opponent's Vanguard, you can put 2 cards into soul. And the last of the grade 1s just being 4 copies of Repelled Malice Dragon for the Sentinel of choice, just being able to preserve cards in your hands with this card and being able to guard good numbers of attacks for the defensive measures you may need to take with this deck to begin with. And for our order in the deck, I run 3 copies of Pandemonium Tactics. You play it with a Counterblast of 1, you Soul Charge 4, and you don't run Final Rush at all in this deck, so that's really all this card is used for. Just a simple order to use that you can Soul Charge 4 with. It does take up a Counterblast, that's why I'm only running 3 copies of this card, because you can build up the Soul pretty easily, but then you also want to save the Counterblasts for our Dragontree marker setup on the field as well. So I feel like you would only need this card for that Soul Charge 4 buildup, and then being able to call out our other options with our Calamity cards that we set up in the field as well, and being able to then use our Pandemonium Tactics to be able to add those cards onward into our soul to use with our Dragontree Wretch, which is the main focus of the soul that we run in this deck to begin with. For the trigger lineup, I'm running 7 criticals, so 4 copies of Lively Breath Dragon and 3 copies of Flinty Slasher to go along with the other pressure that the deck was meant to do, and 4 draw triggers just for hand preservation, Ruse Wildmaster Riley for the additional plus 5k shield, and for the heal triggers, I run 2 copies of Direful Doll Alexandra, 1 copy of Direful Doll Charmaine. I like this just as an additional guard option if your opponent tries to early rush you with your Grypho-Cid, so you can have a grade less than your opponent with your Grypho-Cid, and also being able to guard for an additional plus 10k shield with this card, and 1 copy of Brilliant Flora Wanya for the additional critical pressure of being able to guard against one of a unit that gets an additional power and have a 15k boost. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like I said, this was the final deck for Gryphogilla that I was covering until we get more support in set 10 that could definitely add on to the playstyle for the Dragontree deck. And then even then we'll focus on what some of the other decks may be more of a powerhouse with all the different Gryphogilla support. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Qualia out.